Hello there.
Don't have a good day. Have a great day.
Talk to me, Goose.
I'm gonna steal the Declaration of Independence.
Why so serious?
Squirrel! I could do this all day.
Are you watching closely?
Welcome everybody to the One-Eyed Film Podcast, Season 2, Episode 1. First time back from our summer break. We're so excited. I'm here with Josh to talk about some exciting stuff. How are you doing today, Josh?
I am doing pretty dang good now that Season 2 is finally here, man. I don't know what. I've been bored during the summer. I mean, that's a lie. I've been working 6 days a week, but I don't know what to do after 7 o'clock.
Yeah, so you got the podcast back.
Yeah, we're back full force, baby.
We're back, and surprisingly, even though this is the One-Eyed Film Podcast, we are not going to be talking about film today. I know that was a little, I was going back and forth in my head. I was like, which one should we do? Today we were talking about video games, Josh's passion. I can't wait to hear you go off on it, because this was actually the conversation of our first ever episode, somewhat. We were talking about The Prestige, and we after that we had a kind of impromptu roundtable episode where I just hit record and kept talking, and you kind of went off on video games for a little bit, and I was like, this needs to be a full episode. So now here we are. Don't worry, we will be back with more movie talk next week, but today Josh has an interesting premise that we are going to talk about. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe what we were talking about today is video games can be better storytellers than movies, or something along those lines. Would you expound, please, kind sir?
Okay, while I was thinking about this for many, many days and many, many nights, I wanted to expand the topic just a little bit, and I wanted to ask, what is the best way to consume a story? Whether that be a movie, a TV show, a video game, a short story, or even a book. Now, we are a film podcast, so I think we can agree that we aren't going to be going for books as the way we enjoy a story. There is one exception to that. I do think the Bible has some pretty good stories in there.
Fair
it's
enough.
A Christian podcast. But between movies, TV shows, and video games, that's like the main way that we like to hear a story, correct?
Yeah.
In today's day and age, at least. And of those three, I want to kick it off with one of the hardest questions ever. Between every single movie, TV show, and video game you've ever played, watched, or enjoyed, what is your favorite story from all of them?
This isn't a rhetorical question.
This isn't a rhetorical question.
Oh, man.
I'm genuinely curious. What's your favorite story you've ever gotten from either a movie, TV show, or video game? My favorite story that I have ever enjoyed is The Last of Us, but specifically the first Last of Us, excluding part 2. That is my favorite way I have ever consumed a story because of the way that the storytelling took place, the details, and everything. The Last of Us is hands down my favorite story ever. Now, a very close second of all stories is also Arcane. Absolutely love that one and the way that they're able to do the storytelling there. Now, I've also got a lot of other really good ones like Red Dead Redemption 2. I love that story as well. And Invincible, TV show on Amazon Prime. But it's not until you get to 5th or 6th place for stories until you start seeing movies, in my perspective at least. And that would be Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse and then a Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I think they're 5th or 6th for me. And when I started thinking about this and I was wondering why do I enjoy these stories so much more? And the way that I started to look at it is because of the amount of details that I can hang on to. When I am trying to enjoy a story, I love listening to what the main plot is. Yes, you get a good main plot. That's the meat of the story. And I've used this analogy before. But for me, what makes the meal or the story so good is what kind of seasoning you put on that. What kind of side characters there are, what kind of side plots there are, or just normal nuggets of just story that are within the bigger story itself. And from video games and TV shows, you can much more easily get a lot more of those nuggets, those little side bits of story. For movies, it can be kind of difficult to do that, so much volume for just some sort of plot, whereas TV shows, video games, you have so much time to be able to just feed so many different side stuff to just emphasize the main plot. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, do you enjoy the main plot at its core the most, or do you enjoy going into the side sort of seasoning of the main plot. So when I asked you the question, like, what's your favorite story of all time, like, is it a really good solid main part, or is it really like just all of the details and the relationships and the interwoven stuff that you enjoy more?
Yeah, I get that. I think it can go both ways. I do love the Arcane story because of its detail and all of the ways that the story just works with so many different aspects to it. But then there's also something to be said about not getting bogged down in the details to just enjoy a story for the core plot and all that. As you're talking about like a rich, detail-oriented story, I thought about our viewing of Oppenheimer and how more content is not necessarily better. Again, Oppenheimer was not a bad movie. I did think it was a Christopher Nolan movie at its best, but it was 3 hours long, and we got really bored sitting there. And yes, you can do a TV show binge or a video game binge for hours on end, but there's a certain depth to those that you're kind of touching on, of yes, detail oriented, but also just so much more story to be told. And I think that the Oppenheimer scenario, or any other 2.5-3 hour movie, needs to do it right. I know Mission Impossible did it really well, the one that came out this summer. I was riveted the whole time. The beginning was a little slow, but it became very intense closer to the end. I didn't notice that it was 2.5 hours. But for something, I don't want to talk too much about TV shows, but Arcane feels like it goes by pretty quickly. But video games can have hundreds of hours of gameplay, and that's kind of where this conversation sparked from, is being immersed, not only controlling a character or making decisions that affect the story, but the details that can be put into so much time that you can play in a game.
I think what helps video games so much is being able to just have its own, there's just so much there to enjoy that it's very easy to get distracted along the main plot, along the main story, to just do tons of side quests and everything. And I think that really benefits the game, because a lot of these side quests can just help in with the main plot. But from a movie perspective, if you were to make a lot of video games into a movie, you probably wouldn't have any of those side quests in there. Like, The Last of Us doesn't really have side quests. It's not a side quest game, so you could probably argue that The Last of Us is arguably a movie or a TV show because of the way that its story is laid out. But I think of stuff like Red Dead Redemption 2, just the details of that game that go into so many different side quests that also just help the main story. I think specifically of Arthur Morgan. He goes to this one place and he donates a lot of money to it to get his name on this plaque. And then later on in the game, spoiler alert, Arthur Morgan dies, and then you continue playing as John Marston. And then John Marston visits this place and sees Arthur Morgan's name at the bottom of the thing, and there's a bit of dialogue that you can just enjoy for the sake of being like, I put two and two together. I knew this was going to happen. And you can't really do that as much in a movie. Now, Christopher Nolan, I will say, does find a way to make a movie a puzzle like that, or just really connect two ends of a story together really well. And there's many other directors who are also able to do that. It's not exclusive to Christopher Nolan. But I think just video games have that going for them just so well, which is why I stand on, I think video games is the best way to have a story. But also, another argument could be made, is it really the story that I'm enjoying? Which kind of leads to my second question. When you play a video game, are you really thinking about the story, or are you really just excited to get lost in a world with side quests? What kind of game do you really go to enjoy?
Me personally, I can't answer that because I haven't played enough. I really haven't played open world games yet. I do want to play Red Dead Redemption 2 sometime. But a lot of the games I've played are very linear, like The Last of Us. You're supposed to follow a certain path and tell a story that way. I know Red Dead Redemption 2 has a lot of... I mean, it's the point of it is side quests. It's like you're going to do something and then you hear a damsel in distress call out and you got to go help or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like I like the linear stories more simply because I don't want to get distracted with side quests. I want to do the story, but at the same time I also want I'm a completionist, and so I want to like find every little detail. So like it goes back and forth. I think you make a good point about, do we want to get caught up in all of the side quests, or do we want to ignore them to just focus on what we came here for and what we bought the game for, whatever, the main story, the whole point of it.
I think when it comes to video games and movies and TV shows, there's different goals when you go to consume them. I think for movies, you want to not necessarily be immersed into the movie. You want to enjoy a story as if you were sitting at a campfire telling stories. You want to visualize exactly what's happening and just be awestruck by the visuals, for one, and two, just enjoy the thoughts of all of the possibilities that this movie gives you. Like, for me personally, especially with Marvel movies, I like to talk about what would happen, like the What Ifs TV show. I think that's why that one did really good, because a lot of people are like, well, what if this happened? And the conversation that comes after a movie is where most of the enjoyment is, for me at least, not necessarily in the movie. It's the imagination of just like what's happening behind what's just on the screen. And it's not necessarily immersion for me. Whereas when I go to a TV show, I'm really looking for a deep story. I'm looking for roller coasters of emotions from episode to episode. Whereas when I go to video games, I'm looking to lose track of time and then look at the clock at 3 a.m. and be like, oh shoot, I gotta work in 3 hours. So I think it's also kind of unfair to say one story is better than the other, because the goals are different. Your goal for a movie changes when you go to a video game, because in a video game, like you said, your goal is to just be a completionist and just finish everything.
Yeah.
Can't do that with a movie. It's just one to end and done. So I think it's just a different type of enjoyment that you get. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to compare, but I would still argue that the stories are better.
Yeah, I think you got a point in basically saying you're comparing apples to oranges. Yes, they're both fruit. They both have nutrients of a sort, but they're like different in nature, and there's a difference in how you consume the story. Yes, obviously through whether you're controlling the game or versus just watching a movie. But yes, there's so much more depth to it. I mean, that's the whole point, is to have some control over it even. And maybe that's a little narcissistic to feel like you want control, you need some presence, but it's also fun to have that control over a game, where a character moves here or there or makes a decision that changes the whole game. I know there's games that are built around choose your own adventure, and that will end up changing the entirety of the game. I think that's a cool genre of games as well. And it has no effect on your real life. Like, absolutely, themes can affect you, and that's where you need to be careful consuming certain types of content, especially when it's hidden away in a seemingly harmless game or part of a game. You need to be aware of that. But definitely, you are able to experience things that you wouldn't be able to. And I'm sure there's studies on more or less zoning in. Like, I've found myself, when we say immersed, it's more than just like taking on a personality of the character while you're playing, but also like literally how your vision works and the screen that you're looking at. It's probably very unhealthy, honestly, but it's the immersion of somehow becoming the character you're playing.
Mm-hmm. I think like RPG games or role play games, for those who do not dabble in
the lingo.
In the lingo. I think role play games are one to like really try and push that sort of just consuming. Like, you are going to try and become this character and be immersed in a world, like, or think of Skyrim, for example, where you can change your character to look exactly like you, and then you can act like you in the game. Or if you're truthfully like me, you can change your character into the most hideous looking thing ever, and then run around kicking people and not have any consequences about it. I think just the just zoned inness that you can get to a game is, one, probably not as healthy, yes, but we're not talking about the healthy part. We're talking about like the enjoyment that comes from it. I would argue that video games are a more fun way to experience a story because of how just in the world you can be. And I remember after playing Red Dead Redemption 2 for the first time, I walked away and I almost tried faking a southern accent, or just an accent that Arthur Morgan had, and just pretending to whip out a gun and then put it back because I wanted to be Arthur Morgan, sort of thing. And I think the influence that video games have is definitely much stronger than movies and such, because of just how much time that they can get you in the world and in the story.
I wanna kind of direct the conversation towards something that, again, we talked about very early on in the creation of this podcast, is video game adaptations into movies. Now that we are on the other side of the Last of Us TV show, we've even done an episode on it. We've kind of been on a saga with this thing. Like, we talked about it before it came out. we reviewed it after it came out, and now we're talking about video games. And we had some concerns of it when we heard that it was announced. Like, you were worried, like, with it being episodic and a very limited amount of time, that they wouldn't get as much story out of it. Now, looking back on it, do you think that they failed to make the game or make the story feel whole because of the lack of, all the side quests, or at least the minute details, versus telling the core story and getting that across? Now, we all know about those 2 episodes that are kind of DLCs in and of themselves. One is literally a DLC. But, like, how do you think they did that well or poorly, or
take off the binoculars for a second and look at the show as a whole?
Yeah.
After being able to sit on the TV show for a while, and also sit on the game for plenty of years, the more that I actually thought about it, the more I realized how The Last of Us is the perfect video game to make into a movie or a TV show, because of how linear the story is and how little side quests there is. It is perfect to try and adapt into a TV show. And the way that the TV show went, I think that they did actually a really, really good job of making sure a lot of those details got into the show. I think they did a great job of making sure they got there, like the fun ones. Now, there's a few conversations that you missed while Joel and Ellie are just walking along the countryside, and those, I really enjoyed those conversations. But after really being able to sit on the show, I think they did a really, really good job of still portraying both characters and still developing both characters, and just making it as if it was the game. You just took out the controller. I don't know if they could have done better in that regard. Minus 2 episodes could have done better. But
yeah, I agree with you. It's
2.5 episodes.
2.5.
I think the last episode, they could have drawn out a little bit and then run into another bloater and then kill the bloater. But that's a topic that we probably had in the Last of Us episode that you guys should go check out.
Yeah, we definitely talked about how they dramatized the story. Like, it was already a dramatic story in the game, but it was an action drama. There was very little action in the TV show, which is how it goes. That's kind of the point. I don't want to hammer it too much, but video games, you have the action that you control, and that's the tension, whereas you can't control that in a TV show, so you decide to go the route of drama and make it in the feels and all that. And speaking of feels, you have mentioned to me that there are games you have played that have given you way more emotion than any movie or TV show could have.
I was just thinking about this, and I actually had this question. I'm thinking specifically of The Last of Us, but there's been many other cases. The Last of Us game, I cried. The TV show, I didn't. However, I did notice that I felt like the way that it made me want to cry, because in the TV show, especially that first episode, I was sad. I was pretty bummed about Sarah dying. That's one way to put it. I'm pretty bummed about this guy dying, but no. Video games, technology of computer-generated images is very limited when it comes to video games. As someone who has a degree in animation, you probably know this. But when it comes to movies, so much detail goes into facial acting or just visuals, so that the human part of us that wants to connect to the person on screen, it's more of a that person on screen is having emotions. I feel like I should feel those emotions as well, like when Pedro Pascal starts crying and holding his daughter, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, he's having such a rough time and he's so sad, I should be sad. That's kind of how I was feeling for the TV show, whereas in the video game, I felt like I was Joel, so I felt like it was my daughter dying. And I feel like the connection between both of them is very different, because in a video game, I think I've cried more because of how immersed I've gotten into being the character or the story and just being in that world, whereas in a TV show or a movie, I am thinking that person has such a rough situation. I want to cry because I feel so bad for them. Not because I feel bad or I'm feeling those emotions as if it was me. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. The connection is different. There is a disconnect with movies where you feel, I mean, yes, you want to be immersed in a movie, but there's a lack of presence for yourself. And with video games, like I was saying earlier, you want to become that character in a sense. Yes, it, again, with the kind of zoning into the screen might be bad, but it's the connection with the character is insane. If the video game is done right, I think you can really feel those emotions. And it's not like telling you how to feel. It's giving you a situation that you understand why you're feeling what you're feeling is because if it's molded right, it can be amazing.
And video games, the way they do that is just being able to draw out the story without feeling like it's drawing out the story. You go to a game and you expect it to be 40 hours long, or you expect it to be 20 hours long. Whereas when I go into a movie theater, ain't no way I'm going to be sitting down for 20 hours trying to enjoy it.
3 hours is hard enough.
3 hours was hard, but there's just no way. Whereas if I sit down for 6-7 hours and play video games on a day off, I will be much more immersed into that story because of the way that I'm expecting to consume it. I think of other examples like God of War.
I was going to get you on this rant because...
And I felt like Atreus was my son, so spoiler alert. In God of War Ragnarok, when Atreus leaves, to myself, I was literally thinking, oh my goodness, this is what my parents feel like when I'm leaving for college. This is the same feeling because Atreus is leaving me as if he's leaving for college. I know he's not dead. I know he's not gone forever, but dang, this is sad, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to get you on that God of War rant because a couple months back you had just gone off kind of on a rant, but also just expressing like what you thought of it. And you explained how passionate you were about those games, specifically the second one with the addition of his son, and just... Again, we've been talking about the connection you have with the character, almost feeling like you are the character. So go ahead and rant about that for a second.
Okay, so God of War, I think, is a very special type of story because of the way it's father and son. And I have a father, and him and I also have a connection. So I feel like the relatability that can come from that is much greater because I have a real life scenario that I can experience this kind of connection in. But this one, it's just switching my perspective, you know? That's just where I think this story is special. But the way that it just goes about telling this story is I see the first, how many games are there? The first God of Wars? I think there's 5. I'm not sure. I will admit I did not play them. I watched recap videos of each game before I played 2018 God of War. But after watching those and then knowing that that's how Kratos is, I'm thinking, okay, well, this is this guy's backstory. How would he react to this? How would he go about trying to raise a kid? And then I started thinking about it more. I'm like, well, wait, hang on. This guy's a lot like me more than I think. And I think that kind of switch when it became, oh no, I don't want this Atreus kid to just go out looking for revenge, because me as a person, I know revenge is bad. Kratos definitely knows revenge is bad, and it's just a fool's gambit. And just going with the first game for, I think it took me 30-something hours to complete, and just sticking with that, and then having that ending connection. The whole first game was just building the connection between Kratos and Atreus, and they did an amazing job doing that. And then when it got to the second game, or God of War Ragnarok, that connection was still there, and they were able to just tell a story of like what life is like between a father and a son who are in this world gods, and the battles that come with it, and then the drama that comes with the other gods of the realm, and then revisiting this idea of the relationship between Kratos and Atreus, and then realizing, oh, I never realized I took this relationship for granted, and he's leaving me. And I think God of War and The Last of Us, and not so much Red Dead Redemption, but also games like Detroit Become Human, where they build this connection between two characters, and they are able to just make you feel connected, not to the main character, but to the side characters so much more. And I think a good story in a video game will make you feel connected to side characters a whole lot more than it does the main character. Whereas in a movie or a TV show, the goal is to connect you to that main character, or love that lead role, not the side characters.
Yeah, the movies and TV shows want to push the protagonist, the hero of the story, yes, but when you have time to develop side characters and make you care about them, that's when it gets golden. And unfortunately, usually video games take that side character away from you and make you feel...
You can just stop there. They just make you feel, and as a man, I'm not allowed to do that.
No feels, no feelings. But like I said, I'll hammer it home. Video games put you in situations where you kind of embody the character. You start to feel the emotions they feel through the dialogue that is written out and, scripted and acted and all that. And again, it's not telling you how to feel. You just get to feel it alongside it. And that helps with, first person or however you play the game. Some games are third person. I don't know. That's interesting too, how third person games still make you feel like you are the character. Like instead of you're not actually seeing through their eyes in first person, but third person can do just as much impact. So it's not like Minecraft is a bad example, but Minecraft you usually play in first person. And yes, it doesn't have a story, but you're immersed in a different way as though you are the character. And yet in third person, you still have control of the character. You are the character, but you're not seeing through their eyes. And that I think is interesting. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Here's my personal opinion on third person. I think people enjoy to see a cool looking character. I think video game developers understand that. I think of games like Fortnite specifically, or Rainbow Six Siege, or basically any multiplayer game. But also games like Assassin's Creed, or I think those are the main ones that I think of. They understand that in a third-person perspective, you see the character the entire time you're playing the game, and they can make a little bit more money on selling cool cosmetics. I have sworn not to buy on Fortnite. I'm just going to say that I swore not to do it. I'm not going to say whether or not I did buy anything, but I think the fact that I don't want to say it means you know what happened. It was 99 cents, okay? It was a pretty good deal.
No, you bring up a good point. I had an epiphany when you said that. Full disclosure, I play a little Fortnite. I keep up with it. I know it gets a lot of hate, but it's not that bad of a game, guys.
It's the people you play it with, man. That's what I think.
But there's been talk of first-person Fortnite, very much like the Call of Duty games, and that has its own place. But Call of Duty doesn't have as much skin customizations, I believe, as Fortnite does. Like Fortnite has a new skin every week, even every day, and the reason it's third-person is so you can see that skin. Or for games like Call of Duty, there's more weapon customizations, and that's better in first-person because you can see it right in front of your face. When it comes to the story video games, I would say that goes along the same lines of seeing the character. Like if you were playing those games in first person, you would kind of forget who you are. You would be playing as yourself, as Josh Swanson, as Seth Mossberg in that video game. Yeah. Whereas when you play in third person as Kratos or Joel or Ellie, you realize who you are and you still connect with them because you have that control. Like you still have the floating camera behind them. But it's remembering who it is and that visualization of who you are embodying as you play that game.
Yeah. I also think I personally like third-person stories better. That's kind of what I have grown to get used to, I guess. And I've found that the best stories that I've experienced are from third-person perspective. Whereas I think first-person, you're definitely trying to just get lost in the world, not fall in love with a character. Third person, your goal is to look at the character and be that character. You're looking at the Joel's back for hours at a time, and I don't know about other people, but when I play games, I am, what would this person do? Like, what's this person feeling? I like being in other people's shoes because, quite honestly, sometimes I get tired of my own shoes, so I want to be in theirs for a change, right? So I think third person, seeing the character the whole time, looking at them, you're like, okay, this is this person's world. How are they going to live it? Let's live it the way that the story is intending me to live it because it's their story and I want to be in their story. Whereas first person, it's definitely like you are not the focus of this story. The first person games that I'm thinking of, like Skyrim, BioShock, or Call of Duty games, or Doom. Doom is another good one. That's all I can think of right now. Oh, Subnautica as well.
Yeah.
It's the world that the developers made and the world that you are trying to explore. Skyrim. Yes, you're dragonborn, but who cares about that? You've got a giant map that you can go around and just shout Fus Roda at everything and make it go everywhere. That's where the fun in Skyrim is. Subnautica, I think of the exploration and the developing the story as you're not the main character of the story. That's where first person shines, and in Subnautica that's the case. Call of Duty games, it's a competitive game, so it's not really going to be focusing on what you're doing, it's what everyone else is doing. First person, you're never the main character. Yes, you are, but you're not the main focus. Does that make sense?
You are not really a character. You are yourself. And when you're playing third person, you are the character. You're not yourself. You are, like I said, embodying literally the other person.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good point, is like usually if you are first person, playing a first person game, however they choose to do that, you are kind of more appreciating the world or other players, whether it's random like Minecraft or it's set more like Skyrim, or there is there's first person stories like I think Subnautica and Raft. I know they're silly kind of one-off games, but there's a story. It's still kind of sandbox, but you're still meant to follow the story and be yourself. Like Raft in Subnautica is you're stranded in the middle of the ocean. Weirdly enough, they're very similar, but then you still end up figuring out what the story of the world is, but also exploring the world and building your own base. Like that is you. It's supposed to be you placed in that certain situation. The other games that are Red Dead Redemption, Last of Us, God of War, you are not you. You are someone else.
Yeah, and talking about this first and third person perspective has made me realize an exception to all of those rules. Elden Ring. You're playing in third person, you are not the focus, and it humbles you real quick. You may think, oh, I got this cool armor, I'm about to go beat this guy, Soldier of Godric. No way. And then you die to the tutorial boss. And I didn't die to the tutorial boss at all.
You're not speaking of from experience.
Yeah, definitely not. But I definitely do think that between TV shows, movies, and games, there's always going to be exceptions to the rules. Like the Last of Us TV show, I think, is a really good story. Arcane is also a really good story. Invincible, there's always going to be exceptions to like where we can get the most detail and most fulfilling story out of. And movies also have really good stories as well, where I just love all of the details that they put in there. I think of Knives Out and how detailed that story is, to where if you just look at every single frame, there's probably some detail in there that will just help you conclude to the ending. And there's your fair share of games as well that are trash, and we all know it, but we still play them.
Yeah.
I don't know, I was just thinking of Elden Ring specifically. One of my second favorite game, if not my favorite, just how against the grain it is. It's an open world, but it's not first person. That's kind of odd, but usually if it's first person and open world, the world is the focus, right? Whereas if it's third person and open world, the character is the focus and like how they interact with the world. I think of Horizon Zero Dawn or God of War, which is kind of open world but also kind of not. The character is the focus, whereas you're third person in Elden Ring and all Dark Souls games, and you are not the focus. They just make it third person so that they can watch you die over and over again. And I had another question for you. Elden Ring is, for me, is a rule breaker that breaks rules in all of the best ways. What is story that you like that breaks all of the rules in the best ways?
The first thing that came to mind was Memento from Christopher Nolan, and we haven't covered that yet. It's on our list.
I haven't even seen it. And
dude, it is so hard to watch. You want to talk about time dilation and how Nolan tells a story non-linearly? Watch Memento. But it breaks the rules in a way that makes so much sense and yet leaves you so confused.
Yeah.
We'll cover it in a little bit, but that's what I go to for breaking the rules in how storytelling is supposed to be.
Yeah, and I think kind of the conclusion I get from this question is there's no rules to how to tell a story. You can tell a good story with a movie, a TV show, or a video game. I just enjoy the type of stories that I can connect to the character I'm playing or the main character and enjoy the side characters more. I enjoy the being in the world as the character, not enjoying the character in the world as a movie or a TV show would do. I think I enjoy TV shows more than movies as well, but very specific TV shows, because I find a lot of TV shows don't necessarily have a main character. Like, I think of Arcane, I wouldn't necessarily know who the main character is. Maybe Vi would be a good guess, but Jinx would also be a really good argument. Yeah, or I also think of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, which I know those are movies, but there's 6 of them for me to think of the main character. Yes, Lord of the Rings, it's Frodo and Sam, but then you also have many other stories going alongside of it. And
Yeah.
I don't know, I think just the enjoyment that I like to get from is more than just the main character. And I think that's why I like video games so much. And I think you, as someone who has a degree in animation, enjoys like the character and how they are on screen and just enjoying them that way.
Yeah, and diving into them deeper as a character.
Yeah.
I also like my side characters. I literally from the audio drama testimony that we developed, that was kind of a side character type of thing. I think when I say that I like the side characters, I think I mean that I want to make side characters into main characters. So yes, I do appreciate the main character aspect of it a lot more, and that's what I did with testimony. One last thing that I wanted to bring up is the way that media has evolved over time and how it has evolved down to video games. How theaters were a way that you started movie industry, just with a big screen. I didn't even comprehend this for a while, but when you would see a movie, the only way to watch it was in a theater in the olden days. That was the only way to do it.
Yeah.
And then eventually TVs came along and you could maybe catch it airing on a channel, but you really just had to time it right, and you had to kind of time your day around that. And then DVRs came along, you could record them and you could watch them whenever. Then streaming or on demand. It was on demand for a while, and then it was streaming. Then you could really watch it whenever. And then I know video games, these are crossing over, but video games really started to be like, I can have this story whenever I want. I can choose to watch it, play it for an hour, for 12 hours. You really became controlling of that part of the story. And I think that's just from being very distant in theaters in the 30s or whatever, to really not having any control, to just consuming, enjoying, and then leaving, to TV shows that started to be like, okay, I'll watch an episode here, I'll watch 3 episodes, to video games where you pop in the disc whenever you want and just play it however long you want it, and you had that control. Again, it's immersive, it's controlling, maybe a little narcissistic, because I find myself like wanting to control things, but that's how it kind of has evolved throughout the years. And I think I wonder what's next. Kind of leaning into VR has been the next step, but VR games are very difficult to produce, but that might be the next step of the metaverse and the Vision Pro and all that stuff, where you are not just looking at a screen being the character, but you start becoming the character. And that, again, could be dangerous. We don't know. We'll have to see what goes in 10, 20 years, but it is interesting to continuously watch technology develop like that.
Yeah. Have you heard of some of so there's a guy who works for Unreal Engine and some of the development there, and he was talking about how VR games are going to become an AI-generated storytelling experience.
Oh boy.
Can you imagine? He was talking about how VR may be the best way to experience a story as if you are the character and experience it in a true cause and effect storytelling way. And he explained how what they want to be able to do within the next 100 years. He gave a ridiculous timeline so that if it didn't happen in our lifetime, we wouldn't. Yeah, but
I get it.
What he wanted was AI to be able to make the story
As you play.
So you have a mic, you have motion detecting equipment, so that when you're talking to an AI generated character, the way you stand, the way you talk, the way your tone is all inputted to that character, and their reaction develops the story even further in a way that would be natural to a real life scenario.
That's crazy, and yet I totally see that happening. AI is at that point where your prompt can go beyond just typing it into ChatGPT. It can be speaking to it. I mean, it's already a thing, but you integrate that into a video game. That's crazy. Even the way AI has been used in video game development, I think we should do a whole episode on AI. Let us know if you would want to see that. But I think it's No Man's Sky. Have you heard of that development, where there is literally infinite worlds to visit, because AI now can just create a world that you've never seen before and no one else has seen before. It's not just a finite, comprehensive type of world to explore. It's infinite.
I've played the game, and it's crazy to think that I'm on a planet no one has ever been to before in a game. This planet is specific to exactly me. That is nuts that technology has come this far. Also kind of scary.
Let's do an episode on AI sometime. I know Will wants to talk about that because he's got some hot takes.
I'm sure Will has some words.
And
Will's got all the words.
I even have some thoughts, just because of how it can be implemented in art and stuff like that. So we'll talk about that another time. Thank you, Josh, so much for talking with me. I really wanted to have this conversation. I liked where the conversation went. It got a little nerdy sometimes, but we like that. We accept that. We take those.
Tangent. It, like most stories, there's always stuff shooting off from the main goal.
We were side questing hard this episode. Thank you for your analysis of these video games, that especially the ones that I haven't played, because I can't speak with authority on them. But thank you. You have some great thoughts.
Thank you for having me. In conclusion, stories are just best told well in a format. End of thought. It's just
in a format.
Tell a story. Just tell a story the way you want to tell a story, and if it's a good story, it'll be enjoyed, whether it's a movie, a TV show, or a video game. I just prefer to enjoy stories in video game form because of the way that I feel connected to that story. That's about it.
Yeah, and I think that's really kind of what we appreciate on this podcast, is all the different aspects of storytelling, down to books and audio dramas and whatever. Like, there are so many different ways to tell a story. I can appreciate the different formats instead of it just being a book, instead of it just being a movie. There's so many different ways to tell it. And I know we were wrapping up, but the way The Last of Us is a story that can be told in different ways, and you get different things out of it. Yeah. Like the video game, you get a different emotional feeling than the TV show. Yeah. Like, it's the same story.
Now that's a good story. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Don't sleep on a good story. Now, a good story can be told in many different ways.
Exactly. Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. We are excited to get back into the grind of episodes. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Discord, YouTube, all the places. We got video episodes going up a day after the audio episodes. We have a great community where you can get connected and have some discussion on these type of things, where we can talk about these things through Discord, and you can share with your friends on social media. So follow us on all those places. Follow us where you're listening to the episode right now, wherever it may be. Give us a thumbs up, 5 stars, whatever, and share this with your friends. We want to spread this to as many people who are interested. So get that out to your friends. Thank you so much for listening. As always, we love you guys. God bless.
Peace out, brethren.
I miss that,
That's
dude.
my goodbye.